All right, thanks for joining us, everyone. Welcome to our first episode of our webinar series, digitalops. Um, this episode's the fundamentals of sort of who we are and where we fit in the digital operations market. So this is bridging the gap between IT and operations. And yeah, the short extract down the bottom there, the key collaboration between business departments today to improve organizational agility and unlock process innovation. So if there's one or two things I'd like you to get out of today's webinar that are definitely major gems is understanding digital operations is all about improving organizational agility in the form of business processes. And there's a big focus there on process innovation. And then that together is going to enable the next wave of major productivity gains for both large and small businesses, across Australia and the world for that matter. So without further ado, we'll jump straight into it. So the webinar should be around half an hour, let's say 40 minutes, depending on questions towards the end. So shouldn't be that too long. I've cut it down to sort of just give you the major points, the major topics, so you can walk away. Everyone's pretty busy, especially leading up to Christmas, with some value, and we can sort of go forward from there as to what that means for your specific company or team. So the agenda of the webinar today, I'll go through a brief introduction about myself and the company, Data Engineering. I'll jump into sort of what we mean by the gap, so this gap between IT and operations, which I suspect everyone already knows if you've worked in large corporate before. The importance of it today, what we refer to it as being the most essential collaboration in business today to once again achieve that idea of digital operations, where most major digital transformation programs are certainly targeting or venturing towards trying to achieve. The next point down, what are some of the common symptoms of this gap? So how do you know if you've got a gap? Sure, most people know intuitively that there are some issues there or inefficiencies, which I'll cover on the relevant slide, about what that gap looks like. So you'll be able to go back to your team or your organization and be able to sort of have that awareness of what to expect when you come across some of these symptoms. I've also grouped these into sort of common themes, which we've actually based our consulting model off, funnily enough, and then I'll share those with you guys today as well. Then essentially why IT and ops management should actually care about the gap. It's fairly no-brainer, basically what I've led into so far around the inefficiency and what that means in terms of organizations trying to be more agile and trying to innovate as well. So that's sort of giving it away a little bit there, but I'll go into a little bit more detail why that is so important for those types of management. Then I'll cover some what I'm referring to as treatment options. I think I refer to them as sort of short-term and long-term or sustainable type solutions or options. So I'll cover what that looks like, and it's not necessarily a bad thing to go with a short-term versus a long-term. It just depends on your circumstances, but you should be aware of what those both look like. So I'll cover them as well. And then at the end, we'll share some examples of some of the solutions we've done that essentially fill parts of that gap and essentially make that relationship between IT and operations more of a collaboration, and therefore more efficient around the data consumption process. Which again, I'll go into a bit of detail as I go through the presentation. And then if we've got time at the end, we'll hand over and see if there's any questions out there that I can answer before we finish up. Okay. So who am I? Photo was taken a few years ago now, but my name's Aaron Sharp, and I'm one of the principal consultants at Data Engineering. So Data Engineering, we're about 3 years old now. Started up over in Perth, where we're headquartered, and we've recently moved across to the East Coast, where I'm actually based in Melbourne now, and looking at other industries over here from our original customers or industries in the mining and more heavy industry type space. So I have 10 years plus operations or operational experience. Again, heavily focused towards heavy industry, mostly the miners, where I have been in a variety of roles, including business improvement, a lot of operational projects in that space, so change management, big focus of mine, and probably one of my strongest skill sets. Data analytics, I took a quite passionate about how data can help solve real business problems, and I quickly saw the opportunity of data whilst I was in large corporate a number of years ago, and sort of how powerful it was to sort of helping management make decisions. Project delivery was also a major focus of mine, especially in the major capital space, major infrastructure projects, but also operational projects as well, which I sort of group under business improvement itself, and being able to understand how to sort of the more softer skills with change management, along with the technical, more process-oriented skills of how to deliver a project were pretty essential for myself to sort of understand how all that works, and still being compliant in large corporates. So I got that experience as well, and then also sort of started off in a maintenance engineering type background, so responding to technical faults, some even like 2, 3 a.m. in the morning sort of thing. So I've had plenty of fun and games around that, and diagnosing issues for major systems. I already alluded to heavy industries is sort of my background, so mining predominantly, but engineering services, engineering construction as well. I now specialize in digital operations strategy, so it's helping managers, so mainly operations management, IT management as well, understand what digital operations means to them, and why they should care so much about having a strong focus on that, and how that actually links into digital transformation and sort of the major direction of large corporates today in trying to deliver that. So I really help management understand what that means for them, and look at their digital initiatives and make sure they make sense in the way of actually delivering real value rather than sort of more transactional or cosmetic value that a lot of people, or a lot of managers actually jump onto nowadays without that realization. And I also help manage a number of operational data and software projects. So data is certainly our main and our core focus, but around this sort of experiential sort of part of the operational environment, software becomes, and is certainly growing in importance in operations today, to sort of bridge a lot of the gaps that I'll be sharing, as opposed to, let's say, for example, working out of spreadsheets and things like that. Based in Melbourne, and I enjoy riding motorcycles in my off time. Okay, so what do we mean by the gap? So the operations IT gap. And essentially what we mean is any source of inefficiency between IT and operations around data consumption. So again, the triangle that most people work off, a lot of people do, people process technology or people process systems. Anything affecting those spaces or those areas in an inefficient way is what we mean by the gap in a sort of data-centric sort of piece. So a lot of IT departments in large corporate today, there's less of a focus around infrastructure, as a lot of that's outsourced now thanks to cloud computing, and there's a much larger focus on data and how data is packaged and is essentially shared to consumers in the business. So you'll find a lot of IT departments and corporate are taking a major focus on data and software to some extent, still focused on the application management as well, but certainly infrastructure, so data centers, servers, that sort of stuff, more the hardware stuff is largely outsourced, we're finding today. So with that major new focus of data and IT management realizing, okay, well, we need to still add value to the business to justify essentially our existence as a service provider. In today's world, the big focus on data is saying, okay, well, of those people or in operations out there that are using data to build reports and analysis, even intelligence models, for some of the more advanced firms, how can IT help make that process more efficient for the operational users? That's essentially a big focus on IT today, in sort of keeping themselves relevant and keeping that value proposition strong for them being in-house within actual large corporate. And this is probably something really, really important that I'll stress is that for both operations and IT, it is all around the same core customer, which is the knowledge worker. So they're your engineers, analysts, anyone who works in the reporting and analytics type space, sort of classed under this knowledge worker sort of title or group, if you like. Really, really important that these guys, you give these guys the as much help to sort of allow them to prepare data less and focus more time on analysis and certainly innovation. So if there's any inefficiency, be it around transparency, so do they even know certain data sets or data sources exist in the organization? Is that easy to understand, especially for new knowledge workers as they come to large corporate? It's really hard to understand what the architecture looks like. So IT have got a big focus on trying to make it more transparent at the moment. And then not only that, is also ideally, in a perfect world, you would have IT serving these data sets up to consumers of data, so the knowledge workers, so they can actually consume it without doing any preparatory work whatsoever. That being working in Excel, mashing data sets together to produce an ongoing weekly reports, for example, or if that's a frequent thing, then usually there's some sort of ease of process around that minimizes the amount of preparatory work that a knowledge worker has to do, which is great. But in terms of analysis, you'll find that's usually quite a headache for the knowledge worker. So it's really, really, really important to help our operations part of the business be more agile, to help this knowledge worker out to become more efficient and spend less time trying to figure out if data exists in the organization, what it looks like, can I access it, and then when it's in a format that's got poor data quality issues, all this sort of stuff. This is a common day-to-day matter for a knowledge worker, and as you can imagine, you can't really infer or conclude much with a lot of gaps in data and sources and things like that. So it makes their job extremely difficult, hence a major source of inefficiency. And it's essential. You must get it right for digital operations, which is a major focus around innovating business process. So you don't have to go far. You can tap into sort of some of the Gartner or Forrester reports, major industry authorities around this digital transformation and digital operations, and better understanding what digital operations actually means for business today. And it's a huge, huge focus on the next wave of automation around business processes and being able to sort of see them visually and those sorts of things. So there's a big push for different product vendors out there to sort of provide these platforms that make this easy for the business process users and managers. So sort of operations management, but that's what digital operations is. And then that coupled with all the technology that's out there at the moment, be it digital and or automation technology, certainly in the process space. So it's a heavy focus on process automation and process innovation, which a big race to get that happening today in large corporate. So what does the gap look like? Like, what are some of the symptoms that you can expect if you walk in a team or an organization? Sorry, if you walk around in a team that you may not have been around in a while, how could you see signs of that gap existing? So a common and the most obvious one is frustration. So change needs to occur, and goes through a standard change management process, and the resistance you get in your workforce of frustration around working with IT, be it changing a configuration parameter in a software application they use, or changing some sort of change request where they need to change how they use an application to perform their daily task or their routine task, or they need something slightly changed, and be it a data or software development sort of point of view. So that agility or that responsiveness from IT is certainly a common source of frustration, because the world we live in at the moment is very much we need instant information, we need instant value, we need real-time, on-demand, this sort of stuff. So that's certainly a common source of frustration of what you can experience when you look at a gap. Lack of transparency, which I alluded to before, is huge. Knowledge worker goes into a large organization and knows what to, or suspects where value might exist in an organization, but simply is sort of hamstrung or handcuffed, if you like, around understanding how they can actually prove that. And usually lack of transparency or lack of access are big players in this. So, you don't know what you don't know, right? And some of these large corporations, they have, hundreds of data sources, so maybe even thousands. So how do you know, okay, that's a data source. What sort of tables, what sort of fields can I draw upon? That's the very first question. So how can I see what data sources might be of use to me for my analysis or my reporting requirements? That's a very, very common source of frustration, and is certainly what I would define as a symptom of a gap. Poor data quality. So, okay, we know the data source exists. Let's say we can access it. The next issue usually is around data quality. So fitness of data sets, which I'll touch on in a second, is probably getting the more advanced sort of end of the spectrum of data quality, but usually it's just around, are all the fields being entered in when somebody's carried out a routine task or a process to fill that data set, for example. So from a compliance or process compliance point of view, if you make, let's say, frontline workers make their job difficult to complete business process or enter information into a system, it's highly likely if they can avoid it, they will. So that as a result, that you won't necessarily be highly compliant, or you might be compliant from a statutory point of view, but in terms of a business process point of view, when a knowledge worker goes to consume that information, it's full of holes, so to speak. And as a result, it affects reporting and analysis efforts. So poor data quality is very much a symptom of a gap. And then even if you've got really high data quality in the way of actually fields that are available or information has been entered correctly into a system or information system, fitness of data sets is another source of inefficiency, which is quite frustrating, and I've certainly had first-hand experience of that. So a lot of operational managers, especially in large corporates, will be given like a generic set of reports or tables they can draw upon. And even though they can filter in their certain area, and that's all great in terms of providing information or insight into that particular area, in the world of improvement and innovation today, you need to be able to tweak and work with this sort of stuff. So you need to be more specific around your area of authority or responsibility. So if you can't be nimble and agile to mash other data sets together to be able to produce or experiment, if you like, to see and explore where value exists in other areas, it becomes a real problem in the way of being agile and certainly doing business improvement in the data-driven world we live in today. So what I'm trying to say with fitness of data sets is fit for purpose. So does that data set do exactly what I want it to do? Is it in the format I exactly want it to look like for me to do my reporting or my analysis? And the further away from that, the more what they call data preparation I have to do to be able to get it into a format so I can use it for what I need it for. So that's another major symptom of a gap. Access and security probably should have been up a couple of bullet points, but that is a major common frustration or source of frustration for knowledge workers today. You can see the data source exists, but because it's owned by, let's say, a product vendor, or there's issues around corporate security around accessing that. Certainly from a privacy point of view, if you want to access HR related data, for example, that becomes quite important around privacy and how you can sort of access that. It's just another barrier to be able to sort of use those sources for your reporting and analysis. And it can certainly be seen as too hard. And we've certainly experienced those barriers in some of the projects that we've been involved in. But once you start to understand and sort of work with the different areas of business, you see that it's important to sort of work forward with that, because at the end of the day, that information is needed because there is value there. As long as you can use it in a way that sort of makes all parties happy, then that should be the driver behind getting access or resolving any issues around security and certainly privacy around that. And finally, I believe this is the final one, but the most obvious one is if knowledge workers are working out of spreadsheets instead of software applications. So basically, you know, whether you've got an ERP or whether you've got an operational application that you use to manage, let's say, 80% of your business processes or your tasks, that's great. But you'll find that everything else is done in spreadsheets because, let's face it, no software application can solve all of your business or do all your business tasks because every business is unique. And they try, you know, those applications, you know, they're a business in themselves, right? So they meet the needs of the masses. So manage the expectations around a software, whether it's an ERP or operational application. It's never gonna meet all your business processes, or highly unlikely to meet all your business processes unless it's custom. So that's fine. That's, you know, most of the business process is managed out of one application. But then, you know, if you're working out Excel spreadsheets for the rest of the stuff, or the rest of the tasks, then whilst that can be done, it's certainly not scalable. It's certainly error prone. Somebody goes away, let's say it's there. Anybody who's done their own spreadsheet up and it looks like something out of, you know, control board of some sort, you know, if you inherit that, you're not going to know where to start, right? So you probably end up just creating your own. It's a major source of inefficiency. Whereas now for digital operation, there's a massive focus on not only innovation of business process, but also customer experience. And we're not just talking about customers or external customers. We're also talking about internal. So we're talking about, in this case, knowledge workers. So if you, for example, are a internal customer, you're a knowledge worker or a frontline worker for that matter, whether it's a technician, whoever who works on the front line of your business operation, your goal is to make their tasks as intuitive and as easy as possible in today's operational environment. And there's so much information to consume. It's like we are as consumers in everyday life. You know, we've got sources of information competing for our attention, right? And that's becoming very much the case in organization as well. So as an internal customer, you know, we've already got enough challenges on the plate, and especially with issues around day-to-day operations. So we really need to set these guys up for success by focusing on them as the central customer, or, you know, from a design thinking approach, look at them as the source and understand not only their explicit but also their implicit requirements and sort of make solutions or design solutions around those. You know, really focus on that experience sort of point of view, and it's a major focus on digital operations and for us at Data Engineering today, and ultimately being able to work out of a single application would be I guess nirvana in this case. So as a engineer, analyst, frontline worker, whoever, as you're doing your daily tasks, rather than having to jump between various applications, various systems, you can work out the single source, or certainly a minimum amount of applications to do those tasks or those processes. So that's a major focus for digital operations today. But again, if you're working out of spreadsheets, that's an example of another symptom of the gap. So there's what I've got there: 5 common symptoms of the gap that we refer to between IT and operations. And on this next slide, I just summarize, I guess, these, as well as a number of others that I didn't fit on the previous slide, I believe it's 3 main points. So what this results in is essentially a disempowerment of those knowledge workers for reporting and analytics purposes. So if you can't see what data sources are available to you, you don't know what you don't know, that's already limiting you. It disempowers you. If you can see it but you can't access it because of whatever reason, whether it's security or privacy related, or it's IP from a vendor product, it disempowers you. Then on top of that, let's say you got past those 2 hurdles, then you've got the issue around data quality and data fitness, which is part of data quality. That's another limitation, or it's certainly not as hard as the previous ones, but it can still be a major source of disempowerment, or major source of inefficiency at the very least. So that's a huge one. So remembering that these knowledge workers also are usually pulled left, right, and center for day-to-day issues, or firefighting as is commonly referred to in heavy industry, and I'm sure other industries as well. So if a lot of their time is taken away from sort of a bit more reactive work, they've got less and less time anyway to do reporting and analytics. And in today's world of rapid change, accelerated pace of change, that's only going to exacerbate the problem of these guys to be able to sort of provide new insight around process innovation, how to utilize and upskill themselves with new technology and whatnot. So you can sort of see how this is sort of cascading into becoming bigger and bigger problems as we move forward. So that's one major source of symptom. Another one's around the user experience. So in this case, a poor user experience. So if you've got poor user experience, it's highly likely you're going to have issues around data quality and ultimately compliance-related issues. Once again, not necessarily statutory, but certainly from a business process or an organisational process or policy point of view, which is going to create problems when somebody in the future tries to consume that data for whatever purpose. Once again, reporting or analytics. So especially with software, or without even, if you're a frontline worker or a knowledge worker or whatever, and you need to capture information to make sure the change management is delivered from a compliant point of view. Again, you got to set these guys up for success, so they're more likely to follow business process and capture all that information, so somebody can use that in an evaluating way in the future. Okay, and the third and final group or theme, if you like, is around sharing and collaboration, or rather the inability to share or collaborate. So here we've got, including knowledge of what applications and data sources are available. So we can't share if we don't know, right? And how these two key departments can collaborate better. So again, all centered around IT and operations. If we can't share across different product groups or different parts of operations, because we simply can't see the stuff, or there's no mechanism to be able to share that easily, then how can we scale improvement? How can we draw or innovate from other great ideas or initiatives others in the organisation have done? You can't. You're limited to that silo type mentality that we've all been plagued with for decades, I guess, leading into how operations is delivered today. So in order to share and collaborate and fully embrace that for the purpose of sharing and being able to innovate, it's absolutely essential that we get this collaboration between IT and operations more or less seamless, or certainly massively more efficient than it is today, or what we're seeing today. This little purple model, 3 circles on the right-hand side that's popped up, that's essentially our consulting model. It's actually called a digital operations aspiration framework. Bit of a mouthful, but it's pretty literal in its description. But essentially, what I'm getting at there is those 3 major themes or summaries of symptoms that we've captured. We've effectively, through market research, we've actually come to that conclusion, and it's actually designed our consulting model. So there, where you've got at the top there, you've got workforce empowerment, seamless experience, which is around the user experience, and operational advantage, which is a big focus on the share and collaborate sort of functions. When you start combining some of these areas or parts of the gap that you're targeting, you're getting benefits of things like removing hassle or frustration from business users. You're improving the agility or the responsiveness and the adaptability to change within the organization, being focusing on areas where there's better experience, therefore there's better data quality and compliance that you can leverage off, and you combine that with scale and collaboration, and your organization becomes more nimble, more agile. And then on the top right there, you've got unlock innovation, which is the ability for knowledge workers to be able to draw innovative ideas from other parts of the business, because you've got that scale and that collaboration embedded in the operation. And ultimately, if you combine all these 3 together, you've got this idea of what we call rapid business improvement. So it's basically accelerated improvement within the business operations, and that's what everyone's trying to do today, because that lends itself to being able to innovate as well. Okay, So why should IT and operations management or managers care about bridging this gap? Well, as alluded to before, it is a major inefficiency around data consumption. So data consumption, if you remember, is around those who consume data for the purpose of reporting, analytics, or sort of feeding to more intelligent models. So machine learning, things like that, which I'm certainly not going to go into today. But if it's hard to be able to consume the data you need to be able to produce reports or analysis and values and innovate and things like that, then it's going to be a barrier, and it's going to hold you back in being agile, being responsive to change, and being able to innovate. So if you care about those sorts of things, then you should certainly care about this gap and what you can do to improve the efficiency around the processes and how that gap is managed between operations and IT. A major focus on digital operations is around building predictability. So even though you've got a lot of automation technology in business operations today, automated plant equipment, haul trucks moving around, or fully autonomous trains, fast moving consumer goods, you've got pretty much fully automated plant equipment through there. Even a lot of the processes in, let's say, the education or tertiary education, you got a lot of automation of how sort of higher research degree students do a lot of their research and things like this. These are all, I guess, technology in this case, being able to leverage off to make things or processes more productive. In this idea of sort of trying to be more predictable. So the next wave of industrial automation is going to be a massive focus, or is a massive focus on predictability, because what that enables operations to do is, if you've got more of a predictable operation, then it means less time for your employees, so be it your frontline workers or your knowledge workers, less time they have to focus on reacting to day-to-day problems. So if there's less time doing that stuff, it means more time doing improvement and innovation type stuff. But if you're always fighting fires, if you're always reactive, you never get time to do these improvement and innovation type activities, then how can you possibly compete essentially with today's, the pace of change today, which demands that you focus most of your energy and effort on improvement and innovation. So huge focus on predictability. Want things to be predictable. Obviously, data is the fundamental component in allowing that and being able to leverage off digital automation technologies, along with data engineering to be able to produce that, which means that collaboration between, once again, IT and operations needs to be seamless to sort of start to produce those sort of predictable outcomes with the variability that operations management see often from what they receive as an input to their operation. That's essentially what you're trying to do. Okay, next point. So better collaboration will promote ease of prototyping and experimenting. So that's a no-brainer. But what that is alluding to is innovation, essentially. Whilst a lot of large corporates are starting to sort of build that culture mentality about, it's okay to fail, as long as you fail, I guess, in a smart way. You mitigate as much risk as possible, not sort of reckless. That's like any transformation, that's a 5-year plus journey, probably closer to 10. And if you look at, say, cultures like the safety culture in heavy industry, especially mining, for example, that's amazing. What safety, the culture of safety and how that's so well ingrained and embedded. But it took a number of years to get there, and this will be the same. That this whole idea of, okay, not only you as a frontline worker or knowledge worker, you don't feel intimidated or you don't feel scared or fearful that you can go and approach this in a you've mitigated as much risk as you can, but there's still risk there without being, I guess, hit over the hand, so to speak, from management because you didn't follow all the process or whatever the case may be. So like most things in life, finding a happy balance between risk and reward, I suppose, will help itself towards being able to drive this innovation or innovative culture mindset which is, fail fast, but fail smart. And this last point I believe here is, think about this time, that was what I alluded to before actually. So data consumption efficiency, the more efficient for your knowledge workers to consume data to do what they got to do with improvement and innovation, or improvement mostly, reporting and analysis, and you've got more of a predictable operation, you're getting more time back to be able to do more innovation, be it process or technology innovation, doesn't really matter. It's still, you're focusing on this sort of step change type improvement as opposed to the typical incremental stuff that you tend to see, or you've seen in sort of decades or, the years before. So with the pace of change accelerating, you need to be able to, the improvement's always going to be there, but you need to be able to innovate. You need to be agile enough to be able to change quickly when the markets and the economic sort of side of things changes also. Okay, just move forward a little bit fast. I'm a bit behind for time actually. So I've got here Band-Aid versus systemic treatments. So this is what I was referring to at the agenda, the short, long-term sort of focus. Okay, so again, if you think about that capability gap, it could be capability around people, could be around process, could be around technologies or systems, certainly information systems. One way to, that you could approach it is placing new digital resources to fill the gap, or data resources to fill the gap. So, you go out to the market, recruit these new people, and that's great. You'll fill some of that gap temporarily versus actually upskilling your teams with digital context, so new digital processes and systems, and new empowerment tools, self-service analytics, for example. So this is something that what we've seen hasn't been done that well around digital, is the upskilling of operational staff or operational knowledge workers and even frontline workers with basic skill sets around, okay, let's say digital. How can I do analytics myself using some of these new tools where I don't have to rely on asking several people to get the information I need to put on a real-time dashboard, for that matter. And some of the, even though intuitively a lot of knowledge workers have sort of found their way and starting to use tools like Power BI and typical Spotfire and Tableau and whatnot, it's not a very efficient process. It's sort of just fallen into it, I suppose. But I guess the trade-off here is, yes, you can get digital resources quickly from a technical point of view, but there's still going to be that development gap to understand your specific corporate or organizational processes and the systems you use, as opposed to investing a bit of time in upskilling your existing staff with new technology and new processes if you have innovated them, and being able to continue them on the journey, especially if you've got the right staff who've got the right mindset and the right values of your company. And I think this is the second and final point for this slide, around, you can certainly build another spreadsheet to capture records, so part of business process or task, or build reports for that matter, or versus, say, for example, using your existing software properly. What I mean there is we've seen a number of corporates, SAP, for example, is one heck of a business system or application that, manages that many processes or tasks. It's really, really hard to, unless you're a specialist at SAP modules, to know how to use the different transactions within that software to their fullest capability. And as a result, just through lack of understanding or knowledge around how to use that particular application, some of the other parts of the task might be managed elsewhere or outside of that application in once again some sort of spreadsheet for an example. Or if it is not available in existing software, as I said before, around the consideration of software development for more unique processes within your organization or your operation. So rather than working out those spreadsheets, once again, focusing on that consumer experience or that customer experience within that internal customer. Okay, I'll quickly go through these gap bridging solutions because we're actually a lot longer than I expected. Okay, so one example of a gap bridging solution that we were able to do was we helped the ops manager in mining collaborate with the IT department for a data project, operational data project, where we leveraged cloud computing and incorporated what they call a data mart, which is essentially a fit-for-purpose data, let's say a data set, with self-service analytics capabilities. So what that meant for this operational manager was this manager now who used to go into corporate meetings and, from my understanding, felt very unconfident around his peers at his level around making decisions. I think there was a lack of trust there with his peers around the fact that he didn't have the data to back up a lot of his comments in meetings and things like that. He just felt disempowered. So he was really looking for answers to try and build that confidence and build that trust amongst his peers, and therefore get the respect that he's looking for. So he came to us, and we helped him shed to light, or put onto, in this case, a dashboard that's on the right hand side of the screen there, or one of the many dashboards we developed for him, around what's happening with his business processes. So there's a mass. He was in the maintenance space of the organisation, so there's a huge focus on compliance. Obviously, this particular dashboard talks about compliance itself, and we're able to tap into source systems such as SAP and operational systems and things like that as well. So think of this as like an integrated or a single source view of all the different applications or sources where your information is stored, and put it on a consolidated in a platform, in this case, or application, so you can discover information, insights around what's been happening over whatever time period that you need to look at. So it's really on-demand information. So for this manager, walked into the meeting after he had this stuff, it was a completely different story for him. So very, very, it's exactly what he was looking for around this. Another example of a gap bridging solution that we were part of is we helped architect what we call a sales enablement prototype. So let's just say a prototype, but in the IT management space. So IT managers, even though there's a big focus on data, there's also a massive focus on procuring new platforms, new applications, given how crazy the environment is out there in terms of applications popping up left, right, and center. So a big focus for them is also trying to stay up to date with that and procure and manage those applications. So a lot of vendors who we collaborate with and partner with, we work together with IT managers in large corporate to help them realize, okay, these are the more industry leading solutions or applications out there at the moment. Let's do a quick prototype up, show your IT or operational environment working with this new application, and essentially eliminate as much risk as possible as we can before they make an investment decision in going forward with a new product or platform or application or whatever. So we were lucky to be part of a big data actually, and IoT, so Internet of Things analytics type solution for a mining client as well. Many people involved in this particular one. So it was a great opportunity for us. So prototyping, that's another big focus for us. Again, to reduce that risk and essentially bridge the gap by providing, in this case, applications that make that process more efficient for IT to serve value to their customers, which in this case is operations, or one of their customers is operations. We also provided data services for high degree research services of a tertiary education institution. This one is based in New South Wales. It was just helping them accelerate the research or the analysis part of their research. We sort of managed to leverage off a new automated technology and sort of innovated their process around how they approach that. It was actually around transcription and translation services of I think they're called group interviews, and being able to do that sort of qualitative type research around whatever their research area is. So we're able to provide more or less on-demand preparation of those group interviews, so they could jump onto that analysis sort of component faster. Again, this idea of being able to sort of, I don't want to focus on preparing stuff. All I want to do is just get into my analysis in this case, or the ability to innovate. That's where everything's going today. And another couple of solutions before we finish up. So digital consulting services or for recruitment of new data resources for project delivery. So again, remember that gap. There's a big focus for corporate at the moment of just trying to get as many data resources as possible and embed them into their organization to sort of bridge that gap, or the capability gap, between IT and operations. And we help large corporates understand what those resource requirements actually look like, and then we actually go out and actually help them procure them as well. So that's been that's actually quite a common way of doing business at the moment, and bridging that gap at the moment for large corporate, and certainly what is a large focus of what we're doing today as well. That photo on the right there is an example of that for one of our clients. Upskilling as well, because of, I guess, this rapid pace of change. This affects not only large corporate or industry and the service providers that are sort of oriented around that, but it also affects new graduates or new students coming through the education system, and being able to have their skills relevant for industry today. I'm actually just partway through a blog post at the moment that I'll be posting the next week or so, about some solutions around that, and these sorts of initiatives or movements like the future of work, and how industry, academia or universities, economic authorities, and those service providers like ourselves are collaborating together to try and create a sustainable solution around this. So the students and the graduates actually are able to come into large corporate and be more industry ready and hit the ground running, because that's essentially what those large employers, or employers in general, both large and small, are demanding these days. They're demanding people hit the ground running so they can focus more on their time around being more agile, and that sort of thing. So yeah, we had a use case or an example there of a computer science graduate that came through with us, is still working with us on a part-time basis, and managed to upskill him in the world of data analytics, of a common role called a data analyst today. So very, very happy with the program we put him through with that. And in another industry, finally, this is the last point of this slide. We collaborated with a healthcare small medium SMB or SME with the change management prototype, as opposed to what I had before up there. It was a sales enablement prototype. So what this basically means is more of an operational prototype, where he was actually looking, once again, like a lot of operational managers, they're looking for that transparency of what's actually happening. And if they've got that already, especially if they're probably more of a smaller business, they tend to have a lot of transparency of what their business processes are, but they're looking for a more automated solution so they can give them back more time so they can focus on other parts of the business. And that was a big focus of this particular solution, or gap bridging solution, that we offered a healthcare client here. So we gave him self-service analytics capabilities, so he can sort of play around with the dashboard to sort of get his insights on demand, and automated a lot of his business processes, especially around the accounts payable, and sort of reconciling a lot of that sort of stuff, and linking into cloud services like I think we use Xero in this particular application. So yeah, there's a huge opportunity, and I put that last one down there because it's not all about large corporate. There's a huge opportunity for small SMEs or small medium businesses here, size businesses. They're actually at advantage, to be honest, around being able to sort of quickly capitalize on all the cloud services that are out there. Pay-as-you-go type services, whereas large enterprise are, unfortunately, they've got all those legacy systems and whatever else they have to deal with. So huge opportunity for small, medium businesses, and it's something they should definitely be exploiting more based on what we've seen. Okay, well, that's it. That's been pretty much an hour on the mark, so it's actually been a bit longer than I expected, so probably not a lot of time for questions right now. But what I can do is we can reach out to everyone who attended the presentation today. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time. I really hope you guys got some value out of understanding more about what that gap looks like, and what some of those symptoms, that you can go back to your parts of business and understand. You start seeing the gap essentially, and maybe have an idea of how you can actually work around sort of bridging some of those gaps. And remembering the gap's all about, okay, it's inefficiency around process, people, technology, nothing new there, but it's playing around in the data space, and how integral data is in today to be able to deliver that, the idea of digital operations, which is a fundamental component of digital transformation in corporate today, or any business today for that matter. The only other thing I wanted to mention is that we do have a half-day complimentary diagnostic, which essentially just makes you aware of what that gap looks like for your specific part of business or even business itself, depending on the size. So if you're interested in that, please let us know, and we can tell you more about what that looks like. So what I might do is might finish up there, and I'll make this recording available to everyone probably within the next week or so. And in the meantime, I'll reach out to you guys individually and see if you guys got any other questions. So I apologize for today in terms of running a little bit over time, but appreciate your time, and I hope you guys got a lot of value. Thanks, everyone. Actually, just before I stop, the last thing I wanted to mention was the this webinar series we're going to be holding monthly. You'll start to see newsletters come out and social sharing and that sort of thing come out as well on a monthly basis. So please share and let others know if you found this to be value adding and worthwhile. I don't know the topic of next month's discussion, but we'll share that with you probably within the next week or so as well. Thanks again, guys. Have a wonderful day, and enjoy your Christmas. Thanks.